how do you account for that, given, I mean, your father is pre-Stonewall, but already committed to the humanity and decency of lesbian, gays, bisexuals, and trans, and so forth. But in your work, white supremacy is always right there at the center.
Well, because when I finished college, largely because of William Stringfellow, who I had read religiously in college. Stringfellow was a white, graduated from Harvard, Bates College, Harvard Law School, and went to Harlem in the 50s.
That's right.
So before, at least for white America, race oppression was even on the radar. And he wrote these very powerful texts, My People, the Enemy, which were more than an account of the reality of racism, but a meditation on the systems of power that created it from a theological perspective. When Karl Barth came to Union, they asked him which theologian he wanted to meet. He said Stringfellow. Well, of course, Union never invited William Stringfellow, even though he was right down the street. So Stringfellow, and you know the other book was very important to me, was The Brothers Karamazov, which I had read 3 times in college. And those two books...
In relation to white supremacy?
Well, just in terms
break
of...
Break that down, bro.
No, I think it was in terms of putting yourself in a marginal community.
The empathetic imagination to put yourself in the shoes of others.
And so I moved to Roxbury, and I lived in Roxbury for 2.5 years and ran a small church there. And I had come from a farm community. I had been gone to a boarding school as a scholarship student, but I'd never lived in the city, certainly never lived in the inner city, and I was just devastated at the warehousing of human beings, what we were doing to children. I remember you once asking me, even though I've covered all sorts of wars, what the most kind of formative experience was, and it was that 2.5 years, because it really opened my eyes to how institutions work to keep the poor. The banks, the schools, the probation officers, the police, everything conspires to hem the poor in like sheep. So you have these invisible walls that, of course, are matched by the very physical walls of prison. But on the outside, you don't see those walls. It's only when you're trapped within those walls that you see them. And commuting every day into Cambridge to go to Harvard Divinity School was very schizophrenic, where you would sit around with people on Francis Avenue who would talk about empowering people they never met. They all liked the poor, but they didn't like the smell of the poor. And it was going back. I lived there. I didn't. I remember I was just the projects. This was Mission May, Mission Extension housing projects, which at the time were probably the worst in Boston. 40 or 60% vacancy. All the locks were off the doors. The corridors were unlit. And I went back to Colgate to my great mentor, Coleman Brown, who had been with Bill Weber in East Harlem, had gone to Union, and then had worked in the inner city in Chicago for many years.
And founder of the Sing Sing MA program.
Yeah.
I mean, it was taught for many years.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I just walked into his office and I said, "Are we created to suffer?" And he said, "Is there any love that isn't?"